just take that first step. That first step is a frightening step to take sometimes.
Today's guest is Ned Weiner, a college professor and founder of the Walker School of the Wild, where he helps men reconnect to purpose and belonging through wilderness leadership and primal skills.
If we are completely lost on our own track, the one thing that can ground us and the one thing that can bring us back home is Mother Nature.
He's also the host of the Wild Lab podcast and author of the upcoming memoir, The God of Wild Things.
Like, well, if I just do this, then I'm gonna be enough. Or if I go to this retreat and if I drink this plant medicine, if I do that, like, okay, then that's gonna be enough. And as you said, Stu, it really never is until you're right in here.
Today, we explore wildness, integrity, and what it truly means to come home to yourself. Ned, pleasure to have you on, brother. I noticed in the shared men's group that we're in, you started talking about this primal hunt. And the second you started dropping that, something in me said, reach out to this man. So thanks for taking the time to come on today, man.
Yeah, Stu, it's a pleasure, my brother. Yeah, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'm ready to drop in with you.
Tell me about Step Into Your Wild. What's it all about?
What's it all about? That's a good question, man. So let me start from the back a little bit. So, and I was telling you some of this before we hit record, but I'm a man who's spent a lot of time in nature, in the woods, with horses, talking with horses, tracking, hunting, fishing. And and I'm also a man who's gone through a lot of trauma, struggled with addiction, struggled with depression, struggled with a lot of issues of self-worth, of relationship, of being the nice guy, as we were saying before we jumped on here. And throughout all of the struggles and all the pains that I've been through, the one constant and the one thing that has always kept me within myself and helped also clear me of some of these issues that I've been dealing with has been nature, has been my wildness, right? And so, so like growing up, whenever I was really, really depressed, and I tried to commit suicide multiple times between the ages of 18 to 25. And throughout those years, the only thing that kept me grounded, the only thing that kept me alive, essentially, were the rivers, were the mountains, were the horses, were the tracks that I was able to follow. And so, Step Into Your Wild is really my gift, or well, it's really, I don't know that it necessarily is my gift, right? I think it's come to me in a lot of different visions in a lot of different ways. Many times throughout the years, but it's my soul's purpose of offering the wild and the nature to people, so that they can reconnect with themselves, reconnect with the land, reconnect with each other, and if it makes sense to them, also reconnect to their own higher power, because those are the things that help save me, Stu. When I was really, really down and out, is nature. And so, and not just nature, but the wildness. And so I call it, step into your wild, because we often think of wildness as out there, right? We think of it as the mountains. We think of it as the waterfalls, as the rainbows, as the thunderstorms, as whatever, right? And it is that, right? Wildness it's the granite peaks for sure, but it's also this thing deep within us, right? That so many of us, and I, from the sounds of this was probably true for you as well. It was true for me. That so many of us have been domesticated to, right? Through various forms, whether it's through education or the institutions that we're a part of, media, a lot of different things that bring us up and domesticate us and disconnect us from the wildness that is within us, right? And so when I started Walker School of the Wild, when I started Step Into Your Wild, it was a way to help people reconnect to that part of themselves, right? And it continues to be a way to help people reconnect to that part of themselves, because, like I said, it's that part of myself that saved me through those dark times, and yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it have so many um, beautiful transformations for other people who may not necessarily have, may grow up in cities or may grow up in, not necessarily growing up or living next to the natural spaces. When they are immersed in them and then feel their own connection to them, I've seen it just have vast transformations for people that I'm continually amazed by. And so
Hmm.
that's, in a nutshell, what it is, what Step Into Your Wild is, right? It's a way to bring people in competence with the wild, a deeper trust with themselves, and feel a sense of belonging, a sense of the belonging to what's out there, but what's in here, right? And to
Mm.
what's the community around them as well.
Yeah, man. I feel that. And I feel both a personal grief and a collective grief around
Mhm.
that severance from the land,
Yeah.
and how easy it is for me to be manipulated when I'm not connected to my own intuition, when I don't take time to put my feet on the earth, when I don't take time to connect with the natural rhythms and cycles.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
curious, like from your perspective, what is the impact, either personally or collectively, wherever you want to go with that, of the
Mm.
disconnection that we have? More people than ever are floating in droves to cities,
Hmm.
more and more time on screens.
Hmm.
What is the impact that you observe personally and collectively of that disconnection?
Of the disconnection from the wild. Yeah. I think on a personal level, it's, well, we end up living lives that are not ours. We end up living
Mm.
lives that we choose, but you use the word manipulation. I don't know if I would use. I don't know if I would go as far to use that word. But I would say we end up living someone else's life. We end up living a life that someone else, has designed for us, and that we step into. That's on that level, and that can cause all sorts of depression and shame and grief, which can manifest itself in a variety of ways. And for myself, like I said, it manifested itself in suicidal ideation and having terrible relationships with women, having terrible relationships with other human beings as well. That's largely because, for a period of time, I was disconnected from that wildness and from my wild nature. On a more collective level, though, I mean, we see. I think it's it's everywhere. So it's hard to pin it down because it's like it shows up ecologically. It shows up in the way that we treat or mistreat the natural world, right? And the way that we use resources as unlimited. I think it shows up in the ways in which our institutions are formed, and the ways in which the people at the, we can call it the head, but I don't put that in quotes, right? But the people that are sort of running these institutions, if they're disconnected from their own wildness, right, then we are consistently and constantly reproducing that same domestication, right? And so then, and that trickles down to other people, right, with their own depression and their own shame and the grief that they're carrying. Um, and I also think, like, you can talk about things like the food system. It's our lack of connection to our own wildness and to the food that we eat is in everyday life, right? Because so for so many of us, especially if we, I mean, it's not even true if we live in a city. It's true often if we live in rural places like where I live. I live in the Eastern Sierra, and the nearest grocery store to me is 45 minutes away, right? So if I want to now, as I told you, most of the meat that I eat, the vast majority of the meat that I eat is game that I have hunted and killed and harvested and butchered. But if I want to go to town, if I want to, then I have to drive 45 minutes. And so so it's true for people in rural places as much as it is true for people in urban places, is that like we are disconnected from the food that we put into ourselves, which energetically, I mean, like has a real, there's a real cost to that. You know what I mean? Like if you're, I mean, just the two different scenarios. Like if you go to the store, you go into Rayleigh's or Ralph's or wherever the fuck you're going, and you buy a piece of meat that's in a plastic package, and you open it up and you slap it on the grill and you cook it and you eat it. I mean, it might taste delicious. I'm sure if you put enough salt and garlic and seasonings on it, it's gonna be wonderful. But you're not connected to that animal. Like you're totally distinct from that. And not to mention all of the, I don't want to get into too much of the woo woo aspect of things, but not to mention all of the energetics that go into heart, growing that cow and factory farms and all things that are really designed for inhumane practices of slaughtering. Whereas, if you go out into the woods and you pray for an animal beforehand, you set some really deep intentions, you prepare by getting in shape, by getting your firearm dialed in, whether it's a bow or a gun or whatever, like getting your firearm dialed in, and then learn the land, learn the ecosystem, continue your prayers. And I'm looking off into the woods right now, looking off over here right now, because like I'm imagining myself doing that. But and then you kill and harvest and butcher that animal. It nourishes us so much more deeply than does that plastic, that meat wrapped in plastic that we get at the grocery store. So, and I think those are just a few of the ways, Stu. I mean, I think there's many, many other ways. I think our lack of, our disconnection from wildness has created a culture that is disconnected from itself, and
Mm,
people that are disconnected from
mm.
themselves. You know.
I agree. And I think, I mean, I've suffered from that. And I look around and I mean, I think of the term, even the midlife crisis,
Mm,
for example, it seems to be, I know this is true in my life and many others that I observe and what I witness. Uh, we seem to be chasing more, just
mm,
more,
mhm,
not like, and so it becomes this hedonic treadmill that
mhm.
is insatiable and there's no end in sight. And well, I'll get that next thing will bring me that will
Right,
fill the, how am I
right.
going to fill this gap? There's something here, either
Mhm.
consciously or unconsciously, and I'm trying to fill it. And it's just this perpetual gap. And I think the more people achieve, often the louder that cry gets, the
Mhm.
louder that inner whisper, I guess, or the longing for something that isn't just more, something has a deeper kind of satiation to it. And as
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, no, no. I think that's part of the structure of our society, right?
Hmm.
Is wanting more without knowing why or for what reason, right? And
Right.
it's usually very unconscious. And you're right. Like there's so many people that I know, and I definitely raise my hand as one of the ones that used to be that, like, well, if I just do this, then yeah, then I'm gonna be enough. Or if I go to this retreat and if I drink this plant medicine, if I do that, like, okay, then that's gonna be enough. And as you said, Stu, it really never is until you're right in here, you
Totally.
know.
And I become a tourist in my own life and
Yeah,
pushing
I like that.
pushing presence somewhere into the future. But
Hmm.
it's this unattainable thing because where it is lived in this moment. And I think that is something that's hard to come back to in the noise of the busyness of every
Mm,
single day. And as you were speaking earlier, something was really coming through for me hearing like this idea of, I think our ancestors grew up in a much more relational model,
mm,
and we have a much more transactional culture. And in some ways it's great, can provide many conveniences,
mhm,
but there's something that is lost in the relational nature, be it in the animal. I think of the indigenous asking for permission to go
mhm,
into the land and thanking, you know, praises for the animal, for the sustenance of life, to now, essentially money has been able to replace relationship. And even
Mm,
when we talk about the word privileged, it's often what I understand it to be often now is where money can replace what relationships used to serve, be it
hmm.
relationships with other individuals, relationships with other animals, with the land. And and so we've really commodified almost every aspect of life.
Totally. I mean, and that goes for the land as well,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think that goes for our relationships with it. We can think about going to REI, and I'm going to go on a hiking trip, and so I'm going to go to REI. I'm going to buy the shoes. I'm going to buy the backpack. I'm going to buy all the things because I need all of this in order to actually have a relationship with the natural world. And sure, some of it might make you a little bit more comfortable if it's cold or you're wet, or if your feet hurt, and absolutely. And I'm not dismissing those things, but you don't need that, right? Like sometimes it's as simple, and often, what do you say? Sometimes I think a lot of times it's as simple as going out and sitting underneath a tree and
Hmm.
and meditating and listening to the tree and listening to what that has to tell you. Now, I mean, everyone has trees around them, whether or not you live in New York City or downtown LA, or out here in the Eastern Sierra. There is a tree somewhere nearby where you can do that, right? And it doesn't have to be this grandiose relationship of or this grandiose act of like coming and hunting with me and going out and killing a bear and harvesting a bear and having a rite of passage. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that, right? Like, the relationships that we have with the or can have with the natural world are all around us every single day, right? You have I think it was is that a spider plant off into your left? I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, right. I mean, like, even in that, right? Even in that, there's nature, and there's a relationship. And I think, as you said, so much of our world and so much of our society asks us for more and asks us to do more. And so we always feel like it is like, I got to go get that thing out there. But really and truly, the best way that I've found is to just sit in stillness and listen and attune. And that allows us to deepen into ourselves and deepen into our environment. And I think that's where the juice is, man.
Hmm.
I think that's where the relationship is.
I agree. And that actually sparks something that you were talking about earlier as you were mentioning how you had almost or attempted to take your life multiple times
Mm-hmm.
in those earlier stages of your life. And one of the things that you mentioned that was a grounding force in that was tracking and
Mm-hmm.
the ability to follow the track.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, Stu, I wasn't an almost. I attempted to kill myself multiple times. I mean, I've have published stories about this, so you can read about it online. But yeah, I actually put a gun to my head when I was 19 and pulled the trigger, and the gun misfired and it didn't go off. And so that was a that was one moment, right? Um, but tracking has, and so when we talk about tracking, there's different things, right? Um, there's the simple act of following a trail, following a track to track to track. We call that actually trailing, but it's in the same category, essentially. But from the time that I was a kid, I mean, like a little kid, like when 5 or 6, old enough to just go out into the hills and run around. And I grew up on a horse farm in southern Ohio. And so from the time I was a kid, I grew up tracking deer, following the deer trails, following them where they went. And it was a form, it was at once a form of exploration, but also a form of discovery, right? Because I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where the deer trails were going to take me. But I would always get somewhere that was to my 5-year-old mind, right? Like, amazing and wonderful and beautiful, and still in my 45-year-old mind, these places, because my family still has that farm. They still are wonderful. They still are amazing. Um, And as I've gotten older, throughout the years, tracking has always been a part of it, because it's not just it's been one of the things that has grounded me. It's not just following a track to a track to a track, right? That's one thing. And we can look at pressure points, and we can, try to ascertain where how the animal was standing, or what the animal was feeling at that moment, or where it was going. And, was it hunting? Was it moving fast? Was it sit? Like, all of those things are really, when it comes down to the specifics of tracking, I think are really important and are really good skills to have. But what they allow us to do is to attune ourselves. They allow us to attune ourselves to the world around us, and also our own nervous system and the world within us, right? Because it's not just, there's a intuition aspect of it, right? Like, we can absolutely, we're seeing things with our eyes, right? And we're heading into a direction that's leading us somewhere, that we don't necessarily know where. Um, but it's also leading us with our hearts, right? And leading us with our, really, I think, our intuition. Because there's many times where, if I'm tracking an animal, I will you can lose the track, right? And don't necessarily know where the next track is. And that's not the time that I've found to, okay, I'm going to charge ahead, and I'm going to try to pick up the track somewhere over here. I'm going to try to pick up the track somewhere over here. For me, that's often the time to sit. And that's often the time to really, really listen in, right? Again, not just to what the bird, because you can learn things from bird language, you can learn things from the wind and all of that as well. But, like, it's there's something even more powerful about listening into my own body, and really paying attention to that. And so many times when I've done that, when I've lost the track of an animal, and I sit and I meditate and I listen deeply into my own self, my own inner wildness, I can oftentimes find the track again, and I can oftentimes pick it up. Or sometimes I don't. And that's okay too, right? And I think the thing for me is, like, that practice and that act of trailing and tracking an animal is one, like I said, there's the real concrete hard skills of it. But I think then once you do that enough, then it also becomes, all right, now I'm tracking inside of me, right? Now I'm tracking my own inner wildness. And, oh, like, is there frustration that comes up when I lose the track? Or is there fear that comes up when I'm trailing a mountain lion? Or is there sadness? Or, like, what is actually coming up in me, right, in moments in my own life, and trying to, like, track those back. And those as well aren't tracked by just forging ahead, you know without intention, without purpose, without knowing, without anything. But those are, I've found, at least, more easily access and more, you can listen to those more if you sit in stillness and you listen to your own self, right? And that's really the only way to track, that I've found, to track my own inner wildness, is to sit in stillness and to really actually listen. Because then I can get to the bottom of it, and then I can understand. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm there's this grief coming up here because, oh, well, I mistreated this person in this way, or, maybe this is a father wound or whatever. Like, there's a lot of things that can come up, that I think the hard skills of tracking have taught me, the what we might consider more the softer skills of tracking my own inner wildness. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Totally. That's where I was actually curious to lead next. Because as you were speaking, I was hearing so many practical things that could be applied to life. And
Mm,
I'm curious. I mean, you did just touch on this, but even an invitation to take it deeper. Like, how
yeah.
does the practical side of tracking in the wild apply for you in your day to day life?
Hmm. Well, I think one thing, right? So when you're tracking an animal, you don't know where you're going. I don't know where I'm going. I'm following each track, each scent, each, blood mark, hair, whatever, right? And I don't necessarily know my end destination. As a younger man, I that was a very terrifying thought to me, and I always wanted to know where my outcomes were, where I was going to be going. So if I do X, Y will happen and I will get Z, right? It made sense to me. It was logical, but that's not the way tracking is, right? Tracking an animal is, right? Um, we don't always know where we're going. All that we know is to follow the next track. All that we know is to follow the next sign, and it will lead us somewhere else, right? That end destination, it might be an alpine meadow, it might be sagebrush, it might be a tree, it might be to a dead end. And all of that is okay, right? And for me in my own life, that was a real hard one. And it still, I'm still learning it, I think, Stu, is to not be attached necessarily to the outcomes of where things are, right? All that I know I can do is to do the thing, do the skills, right? And to follow the next track, the next small little win, or the next invitation, or like that. It feels good over this way. I'm going to go that. I'm going to do this with my business, or I'm going to do this with my book. That feels right. And not being attached to, well, shoot, is my book going to get, published by Simon and Schuster, or am I, is my business going to be a 7-figure business, in 5 years or whatever, right? Like, I think not being attached to or tied to finding the animal at the end of the string, as Tom Brown Jr. would say, but instead being devoted to the singular act of tracking each and every, the next sign. That I think has been really, really beneficial. And again, it's still something that I am definitely learning and definitely trying to improve in my own life. Because it is, our society is definitely outcome based, and we want to know that if I go to college, I'm going to get a good job, I'm going to make X amount of dollars, and then life is going to be happy and everything's going to be great. And that's, I think when we do that, we're missing the entire point, right? We're missing the entire point of why it is that we're doing the things, right? Why it is that we're tracking the animal, why it is that we're writing this book, why it is that we're building this business,
Mhm.
right? And we're doing it because we know, or at least this is, I'm speaking for myself right now. I'm doing it because I know that, like, this next thing, like this next primal hunt, or these guys, these vets that I'm taking out next in a couple weeks, to go hunting. It feels right. It feels like the right thing to do. I don't know what the outcome of any of it will be, right? But I know that in this moment, it's the right next step.
Mm.
And so I think for me, it's just always taking that right next step. I don't know what the last step is going to be beyond death, but I know that, like, if I take this next step, this just one next step, things are going to work out.
Mm.
They're gonna take me to, whether it's the animal, or find out that no, this isn't actually the path. That's a good thing to learn as well, because then I can go a different way, right? That's not a
Yeah.
failure. It's just finding out that, oh no, I was going the wrong way. Here's the right way, you know?
Mm. I think it's Boyd Vardy that says knowing that you're off track is still part of the track.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, I mean, he gets that, comes a lot from like Joseph Campbell and Tom Brown Jr. and all of that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. So talking about that
Hmm.
why do you do this at a deep level? What is this for you?
Yeah, there is an answer. There's a few answers for this. To put it simply, I do it because I was a very lost boy and man for a very long time. And I'll tell you a story. So, and I told you that, I think I said this already, but I've had the vision for step into your wild and to walk or school with your wild has come to me many times in ceremony and in the mountains. It's come to me many, many times, and it continues to evolve in smaller ways. Um, but I think the time it came most clearly to me, I was on a 4-day vision fast in the desert, and it was a third night and going into the fourth day, and I had been, staring the sun down as you do on a vision fast, and um, praying and beating my drum, and it was a really whole fast was very beautiful. Um, and on the in the moonlight, after the sun had set and there was still some orange and yellow in the mountains or whatever, I was looking out over this valley and the desert, and there were some mountains across on the other side of the valley. And in the mountains on the other side of the valley, this man came to me. The spirit of the mountains came to me, and he held out his hand. And in the palm of his hand was a mountain. And like in that mountain was like the entire world, where all of these things, people and rivers, and like there were cities, and it was an entire ecosystem, an entire world that was on this mountain in the palm of his hand. And he handed it to me. He said, the mountain has taken care of you, because I mean, really, throughout the whole vision fast, the mountain had really safeguarded me and taken care of me. And he said to me, the mountain has taken care of you. And now it is your turn to take care of all those who are lost and share this mountain with them. And so, and I know that sounds really woo woo, and maybe your listeners might, I don't know how they react to that, but it was a very real thing that happened to me. Um, and I do it. I take people out hunting, fishing, bushcraft, tracking, because it's helped me find my way, right? And I know it helps other people find their own way home as well, right? And by home, I mean back to here, right? Back to their own self, back to their own inner wildness. And I actually get a little, little touched up there, because it's been a long journey for me, and every time that I take somebody out in the woods, even if it's for a few hours, or whatever, um, I can see them coming back to themselves just a little bit,
Mhm.
right? And that's powerful, because I think, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be around here for the grace of God and a few other things as well, but nature and wildness have definitely kept me on this planet and kept me in this body. And so to offer that gift, and it's not really even an offering, it's more of an invitation. Um, but to open it up to other people and allow them to see the same things that's out there and also simultaneously in here. Yeah, that's why I do it, man. To help the lost people, to help the
Mm.
lost boys, and that's why I do it.
Wow, man. Thank you. I noticed the emotion coming up. I could actually feel it in my body as you were sharing, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm curious, like emotionally, what comes up for you as you tap into that essence.
Well, there's there's a lot of grief. I've worked through a lot of the shame, and and I've worked through the grief too, but for for all the years that were really lost to me as a boy slash man, because it was many years, who had no idea who he was, you know, and I don't regret any of that, Stu, because I mean, I love the human and man that I am now, and I would not be that without that. Um, yeah, and at the same time, that was a very, very sad boy and sad man that woke up. I mean, Stu, I woke up every single day of my life from the time that I was like, I don't know, like 17 or 18 until I was 32. Every single day of my life, my first thought was, how am I going to kill myself today? And um, yeah, and that's a brutal way to start your day, and it colors the rest of it colored the rest of my relationships and the rest of my day and the rest of my life. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of sadness there, but there's also the, behind the sadness, there's a tremendous amount of joy as well, um, because that very sad boy and man, also got to experience a lot of really wonderful things and a lot of really beautiful things in this world in his search and in his exploration for himself.
Hmm.
So,
Thanks, brother.
yeah,
Yeah. So
thanks for asking.
a man who's maybe in that same kind of existential crisis right now,
Mm.
regardless at what phase he's in, like where would be a good starting point for somebody to start to come back to who they are?
Oh boy, Stu, that's a big question.
Hmm.
It's a big question. Well, I'll tell you, a a former client called me the other day, who was in a really bad way and wanted my help. And unfortunately, like now I'm not living right next to him anymore. And so like physical help is a little bit more difficult to offer him in this moment. Um, but one of the things that I told, and I don't need to get into the details, but it was similar along the lines of what you're saying. And what I told him was to go out and he lives close to a river. And I told him to go out into the river and to offer his pain to the river and just like very intentionally offer it all that he can to the river and ask it to wash it away and ask it to take it. Because I mean that's in the simplest form and in the simplest way to start, right? Like if we don't know where else to go, if we are completely lost on our own track, the one thing that can ground us and the one thing that can bring us back home is Mother Nature, because she is the one thing that has been there throughout all the time. And I know, and I can tell you from my own experience that in the darkest moments of my life, um, when I was going through a divorce or in some of my, very depressed years, I would offer that grief, that shame, that pain to the river, or wrap my arms around a tree and offer it to a tree, because sometimes it's the only thing that can hold it. It's the only thing. Like if we can't hold it, maybe someone else, and someone else isn't there that we can trust, then offer it to the river, offer it to the tree, because they're our home, and it's the way to get back to it.
Hmm. Yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. And I think there's tremendous value in just making that offer a living prayer. Like
Mm,
I don't know. So
yeah.
like just being willing to bring the humility that you don't know, that I don't know. And I mean, man, it's still interesting. Like even with where I'm at on my journey, as I reflect and listen to you speak, like there are so many times that some overwhelm comes up. The challenges in my relationship, the challenges with running a business and putting
mm,
myself out there with something that I love, and all of that self-doubt. And still, so much of my patterned response is to go up to my head and try and figure it all out and get the next,
mm,
the next step solution. And I'm continuing to remind myself that I don't need to have it all figured out. And sometimes
yeah,
the best thing I can do is to admit that I don't, and ask for help, ask for guidance
mm,
from Mother Earth
mhm,
and all the wisdom that she carries. I these trees have been around so much longer than I have.
mhm,
The
mhm,
wisdom of the river, it's to expand my community beyond the people that live in the houses around me into this broader community, and realize the network of support that I actually have
mhm,
is honestly still something I'm trying to do more, because
mm,
I know I need it, and I know my hubris can kick in, and when that is, I feel like I'm in an existential fight with life,
mm.
and that alone is painful. It's I feel like Sisyphus pushing that
Yeah, for
boulder
sure.
up the hill.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure, for
you're
sure.
also a
It's
writer
I am. Yeah, I am.
and a professor of writing.
I am. And I was gonna say, one of the things, as you're saying, asking for help has been difficult for you. Um, as a professor, it is one of the things that I really try to impart upon my students is to ask for help, right? Because it's against so many men and women. I mean, I know a lot. I know we work with men largely. Um, this is true for women as well. I find in my professorship is that asking for help is seen as a sign of weakness, and it is very, very difficult, even in an academic setting. It is very, very difficult for people to do, and yet, and yet, like from a, I mean, purely statistical standpoint, right? It's something like in my writing classes, it's something like if you ask for help and get help from a tutor or from me or somebody, you're 80% more likely to pass the class, right? Which is, necessarily an academic setting, but like I think it applies to all aspects of life, right? Like, as some of my mentors have mentored me, like they have mentors, they have people that help them, so anyways, I off tangent to your question, but asking for help, it's abundantly important. I just
Well,
want to.
why do you think it is? Like I also noticed it. I noticed that in myself, first of all.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
also notice it in my partner, and I notice it in so many people around me, that asking for help, or I'd even expand that to receiving more
Mm,
broadly,
yeah, sure,
is
sure.
an incredible challenge. Why do you think that is something that we struggle with so much?
Well, I think I think it's important to say when we say we say who the we is in that, and I think it's Western civilization, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the rugged individualism, and the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality that has pervaded Western civilization since the times of colonialism. And so I think that's the we, and I think that's also the why, right? It's a sign of weakness. If you can't do it by yourself, then you're not a man, you're not strong enough, you're not worthy of what it is that you want, right?
Mm,
um and that's clearly inaccurate, wildly inaccurate, and it's just a false narrative that we've placed upon ourselves. But yeah, it is the narrative that Western civilization, one of the major narratives that has driven Western civilization. So yeah.
mm. It is interesting. And I do see it being a barrier to our individual and collective greatness, just this siloed mentality that we
Hmm.
have. And a return to communal living. I mean, I don't necessarily know if we'll return to villages in the way our ancestors did, but
Mm.
what are
Hmm.
ways that you see, asking for help, receiving, looking like as we steward that in a good way moving forward?
Mm. That's a good question. Um, Well, I think it starts with I like that you put it as receiving, right? I mean, because I think even especially for men, that's the harder at part of it is the actually receiving for the help. And so I think it starts for me at least with embracing our own vulnerability, not as a weakness, right? And to see that as actually a strength and actually something to lean into. I think that's where it starts for me. Um, and yeah, as far as I don't, in fact, I don't necessarily even think I want like a whole an entire back to the land movement. We're all like living. It's not. I don't think it's a really sustainable future for society. But I do think that there are other ways of re-envisioning the tribe, re-envisioning the community. And like in some ways, Stu, like it's happening in some
Yeah.
ways, I mean, like here you and I are, meeting through a men's work group and then, conversing, you in New Brunswick, me in California. And so I mean, I think and for all the things I can say about technology, right? There's some real benefits to it that are allowing for this sort of digital and virtual tribe to exist in ways. And so um, I think, I don't know, in my naive or hopeful, I would rather say, version of the world, I do think it's possible.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, and something that's been really humbling for me because I'm uh, also trying to get better at receiving. I've been a terrible receiver most of my life, and
Mm,
I've thought that, to your point, to be stoic and upholding this. I don't even know if I would have considered it rugged individualism on my end, though this, I guess, blindly
sure.
inherited aspect
Yeah.
of my culture. But I felt more comfortable as the provider, and that's it felt safer to be the
Mm-hmm.
giver, to be the one
Mm-hmm.
doing these things, and to humble myself to be able to receive has been a tremendously hard and confronting practice, but also one that's deepened my connection in ways that I didn't see that were possible, or that
Mm-hmm.
would be, the fruit. I didn't realize the fruit of what would emerge as I started to practice receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that was somebody offering me help with doing a project, or listening to me when I'm going through a tough time, or just accepting the gift that somebody wanted to give me when in the past I probably would have just pushed that back on them,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe some constructive criticism, whatever that receiving is. I've come to realize through leaning into that uncomfortable edge for me, the reciprocity that comes out, and the necessity of giving and receiving, to be in a reciprocal relationship with myself, with other individuals, and with the community that we are part of more broadly.
Totally, man. And I mean, I think it's even really, we often think of this providership as like, well, that means I'm providing everything for
Yeah.
like this is me, right? But that's just really not accurate, right?
No.
Especially like if we're talking about like a romantic relationship where we're in partnership with a woman, um, or or the feminine, depending, how we're looking at. But like I'm straight, so I'm talking about a woman, right? If we're in partnership with a woman, it's um that yes, we function as providers, but like the the feminine energy offers a wisdom that is a part of that, like that can give us, um some people use the word like oracle, or they can give us insights into actually help being a better provider, to improve our business, to improve ourselves, right? And so that only happens if we, that wisdom only comes through if we're vulnerable enough to allow it to come through to ourselves, right? And so yeah, providership, absolutely, but it's also providership in tandem with the feminine, right? In
Mm,
tandem with the woman in our relationship and in our lives,
mm,
right? It's and so I think that does go back to that false narrative of like, well, I'm the man, I'm gonna do all these things, and like, yeah, absolutely. And like, here's this you know wonderful, beautiful wisdom that comes from the woman that like we can't really tap into. And if we're open to that, it can help us be the better versions of providers that we want.
Yeah.
Does that track? Does that make
That
sense?
it tracks big time, man. And what's coming through for me as you're speaking that is this idea that I think a lot of men take as weakness, but sensitivity. And
Sure.
when I think of sensitivity, I'm not thinking of, totally overrun and capsized by emotions, but I think
Hmm.
of the attunement,
Oh yeah.
whether that be to somebody else's nervous system, to, the attunement or the sensitivity of to the land or to, all
Hmm.
of what is around, just being more attuned even to my own nervous system. And I think with the absence of that, that's where we become domineering, where what maybe was with good intentions for providing and doing this thing all of a sudden becomes unconsensual
Hmm.
because we've lost our capacity to listen along with that ability to receive.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And attunement is the biggest, is one of the biggest things, like, for the work that I do, right?
Mm,
Whether it's, and I think it's, and I was thinking about this, prior to jumping on with you, it's really the word attunement, because it's, you know as I told you, like, I was a horse trainer for 15 years, and then now I'm a college professor and also a wilderness guide, and running men's groups and taking men out on primal hunts. And all of those things are really about two things: listening and attunement, which are really, like, kind of the same, right? Attuning ourselves to our surroundings, but also attuning ourselves to what's in here, right? And that wisdom of the feminine only comes through when we are attuned to that and we're open to listening to it, right?
mm.
And open to receiving to it. So I think, perhaps, I think part of the difficulty, to answer your question previously, part of the difficulty in receiving stems from our inability to actually listen and our inability to actually attune to the world and
So
ourselves.
where does a man begin? He's probably, maybe he's calloused up and lost
Hmm.
that sensitivity, the attunement. Um, where do you start?
From me, and I think there's a
Yeah,
million different avenues into this, Stu, and so please don't
sure.
take this as
I'm.
the
I want
gospel.
Ned's. I want Ned's download.
Yeah, man. I think there's a lot of different ways to start. But, like, for me, like,
Yeah.
working with me, like, I like to start in nature. I
Hmm.
like to start by attuning to the smaller things. And whether that's looking at it, ants really, like, really meditating in and attuning into, like, ants crawling on a ground, right? Or the wind through the trees, or really listening to the sound of water over rocks, right? Like, starting very, very small and attuning into the natural forces in the natural world that is around you. I think that's an easy place for me to start, and I think it's an easy place for any for men and women to start if they want to start doing that, because it is, we have access to, everyone has access to it, right, at all times, whether it's, you know whether you're living on the ocean, or you're living in downtown Los Angeles, or you're living at the base of the Eastern Sierra here. We have access to those things, because despite the unnaturalness and the domestication of the world in which we live, the wildness is around us and nature is around us at all times, if we are ready and willing to listen. And then, when we put it into the body in that way, when we begin to attune to the things that are out there, and we cultivate those skills a little bit more, then it becomes a little bit easier to, like,
Mm.
drop into our nervous system and attune to what's in here. Because for
Yeah.
me, and I say that, as I said, this is there's a million other ways of doing this, but, like, for me, is like, I couldn't get out of my head. It's difficult for me to get out of my head unless my body is moving, and I'm moving in a physical space, and I'm connected to that physical
Hmm.
space. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, for me, that's it.
It makes total sense. And I think even to add on to that, like why
Mm,
I would advocate or double down on that is because of this idea of co-regulation. Like
mm,
I know there's so many men and women in this noisy, dopamine flooded world that we're in, that to get quiet enough to be able to listen to what's going on in here could
Mm.
feel more like getting crashed by a tsunami than having waves come up and kiss your feet, right? And
Sure.
so like having this opportunity to slow things down and down regulate the nervous system to the
Mm.
point where then I am able to attune to the internal world, to the grief, to the sadness, because it's all there.
Mm.
All of those things are living underneath, and it might look like addiction. It might look
Mm.
like chasing quick screen hits or
Mm.
overworking and just
Mm.
being obsessed with work. But I think that ability to co-regulate with nature, like there is, we already have enough, even scientific. Like this isn't even at a woo-woo level anymore. I mean,
Mm.
anybody
No.
who spent enough time in nature doesn't need a science experiment to prove this. But
Yeah.
to know that these are living things that have an energetic to them, and that we can
Mm.
track that even with
Yeah.
measured instruments, that is going to bring us down. That is going to take our nervous system to a state where then I think being able to let some of those more challenging, suppressed uh, emotions inside to be able to have a place to be able to actually move.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's there's a lot of research and a lot of science behind it, and I hesitate to go too woo woo on things a lot of times, even though I can go down those roads, obviously. But yeah, this is very real, man. I mean, I like the way you put co-regulating with nature and breathing with nature and co-regulating nervous system. Yeah, it's very real. It's very very real.
Totally. Well, we were talking about Dewey before the call, and one thing
Mm.
he often says is we're wounded in relationship and we heal in relationship.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that obviously stands true with our human brothers and sisters, but it also
Hmm.
stands true with our relationship with the land.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think it's, and I've thought about. But I don't know if you can hear that, but I live very close to a military base, and so now there's helicopters flying over top of me right now. But yeah, it's, and I think in a lot of cases it's a wounding that people don't even necessarily know that they have,
Right.
because it's a relationship that they're not even aware that is like, bro, super deep in their DNA, right? Like all of us, whether, I don't care if you're a software engineer in Silicon Valley, like wildness in nature is deeply rooted in your DNA, like
Mm.
in every single human's DNA, because we are animals. That's what we are.
Mm.
We can pretend that we're something else, but that's what we are.
Yeah, totally. It is there. Yeah, I mean, like even you catch the moon rise or the sunset or the
Mm.
stars, like they're all vestiges of, oh yeah, you look up and all of a sudden, like it offers this perspective. And I think it's also because it's tapping into this genetic history that we have. It's
Mm.
like, oh, why is a fire so captivating?
Right.
Right? Like, is it just because the fire is a beautiful thing and is dancing and doing cool things?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And for generations, for millennia,
Hmm.
that's where conversations, that's where tribe
Hmm.
came together, that's where we
Hmm.
cooked, that's where these things
Right.
happened. And I think there's some part of us beyond the beauty of a fire that remembers that when we're there.
I believe so as well. Yeah, absolutely. I feel it.
Me
I
too.
believe it.
Me
Yeah.
too. Tell me about, we were talking earlier about something, and
Hmm.
I'm curious to get your take. Like, you're a writer, you actually help others with writing. There's a book
Hmm.
living in you that's continuing to emerge.
Sure.
And it's a memoir. But before we even touch on that, I'm curious about writing as sense making.
Mm.
Like,
Hmm.
what does writing serve for you in your life?
Well, I mean, it's always been my way. This whole new thing of, it's not even a new thing, but like this thing of journaling, which is like kind of a buzz phrase and has been for about a decade or so. Like I had no idea that was an even thing. Like I just always, when I was a kid, always had a pen and paper, and I was always just writing, and I always have been. And so it's how it's one of the ways in which I understand the world, right? Um, and make sense of it through the conversation that happens in my brain to my hand, whether that's pen and paper or whether that's a computer these days. More often, it's a computer these days. Um, and I think there's like the other day, I was I sent a video of a sunset to somebody. It was beautiful, one of my most beautiful places to watch a sunset. And I thought like while I was making the video, like I could put like some poetic words to it, or something. And I chose not to, largely because there was in that moment, like I couldn't make sense of the beauty of that sunset, right? But through poetry, through art, through creative writing, right? I think it's my way of understanding beauty, understanding the beauty of the world, and the beauty of the wild nature that is around us and in us. And it's fucking hard. Let me just say that, right? Like, because language does not depict actual, or it is very difficult for language to paint the picture of a sunset, right, accurately, to place us there. But when we tap into a poetic verse, or creative writing that allows the reader and the writer to place themselves in that sunset, I think that is sense making, right? And I also think that like there's a lot of things that we don't understand or I don't understand. And when I write through them, I begin to understand them more fully. Let me give you an example. When I was in grad school and I was studying the history of wildlife in California, is one of the things I wrote my dissertation on. But that was my first semester, and I remember this guy who was in one of my classes, and he asked me about the essay that I wrote. He was like, how'd your essay go?" And I was like, I don't know, it's fine, I guess. I wrote it, it's done. And then he said, "Well, did you learn something?" And I was like, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did learn. I learned a whole lot." And I think for me, that is what writing is that like I'm writing a memoir now, like I said, and revising it for 470th time or something. But even making sense of my own journey and making sense of my own story has been really, really powerful, right? So there's a part in there, like I'll tell you, there's a part in my memoir that is, the whole memoir is essentially the story of me overcoming addiction and depression through the power of nature. That's really this in horses. That's the story, in a nutshell. And there's a part of it where I there's an essay. So it's broken up into a bunch of different essays, and there's an essay in it which is the moment where I quit riding horses, right? Which is kind of a big moment in the book. Big moment. Actually, it's less of a big moment in the book, but it's more of a big moment in my life. And the first time that I wrote that essay, which was a few years ago now, I wrote it as a way. I had a real bad falling out with the ranch that I was working with at the time, and they kind of forced me out, and it wasn't a. I was young. I did some stupid things, and it wasn't. Um, yeah, it wasn't my finest moment. But when I wrote the story, I wrote it objectively as one of the ways that the story could be told, right? And then I sat with that the whole book for, I don't know, months, and I was reading through it, and like it didn't make any sense to me. Like the journey didn't make sense to me, and part of it had to do with this one essay that was right there. And then I really thought about it. I was like, well, yeah, I had a falling out with these people, and yeah, like they asked me to leave. But if I actually think about the truth of the matter is, I had quit riding horses 5 months prior to that for my own reasons. And I was just living on the ranch, just not even riding. I was just doing things. I was like, I So the first way I wrote the story as like I was a victim
Mm.
of this, right? And then I went back to revise it, and I wrote it as not as a victim, but as it was my choice, right? And now, Stu, both things were true. Both, all of the objective facts didn't change, but the way that I told the story, and whether or not I was a victim or whether or not I was a creator of my own life, right? That's what changed. And I didn't change any of the facts, I didn't change any of the things, but I chose to tell the story in a different way,
Mm.
right? And the power of revising that story helped me make sense and see myself not as a victim, but as a creator of my own life.
Mm.
Does that follow? Right? And so, like, I think it's really important when we are telling stories, our own stories especially, right, how we choose to tell them, right? Because there's the objective fact of the sunset, or of my life, right? There's the objective facts, and then there's the story that we tell about it and how we tell the story. You know what I mean? And so we can tell, and I think a lot of times, we, in the world in which we live in, we want to think like it's this black and white story, right? Like it's this very either you're a victim or you're a creator. But really, Stu, there's so much nuance in all of our stories, and writing has allowed me to not just understand the nuance, but also understand myself, and work through a lot of the trauma that I've been
Mm.
through. Right? I mean, because like I said, I have a you can go out there and read some. I have a Ponce de Leon, which is a story of one of the times I tried to commit suicide, and writing that essay specifically required me to live through those moments, multiple times. The first time, the thinking about it, and then the first time writing it, and then revising it, and 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 really having to dive deep into, like, I mean, I know this is like, seems like small minutia, but it really matters, at least the way that our memory works. But like really having to dive into, okay, well, was that a starling that was on in the bush while I was sitting there, or was that a red-winged blackbird? Was that, what was
Mm.
that, fescue grass, or was that Johnson grass that I was sitting beneath, right? And like, these small things actually matter a great deal to the story and to how we understand ourselves in it, right? Because, um, yeah, they become the framework for our own identities.
Mm. Mhm.
Does that make
Mm.
sense?
It does, and I think also, we don't experience life as it is. We experience it as we are, and I think the meaning that is given to any particular situation will influence the emotion that arises.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we also know that because two people can undergo the exact same experience and emerge out of it very differently. What
Mm-hmm.
is that? I mean, the experience was the same. The objective experience of that happens to be these two people went, to war or into this situation or had a fight and experienced the same thing, but the meaning that was attached to it, one now has PTSD and one is, doing crazy
Mm-hmm.
shit and climbing mountains, and
Right.
that's been a defining moment in their lives. So
Mm-hmm.
I, as you're talking too, one thing I think about that's coming up for me is almost a kind of spaciousness, like,
Mm.
because I mean, we're in here, right? And the story is just always going up in the head. And
Mm.
I think even the opportunity, even if it does stir stuff up, which it inevitably will, especially if it's an intense experience, putting it down will obviously stir more of that back up. But at the same time, to then have it down and to read it versus to think it, I think is already one step of transmutation that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Stu, writing is an embodied act, and if we're
Mm,
writing from our head, we're not writing properly,
yeah.
right? We just aren't. And that, when I was talking about the minutia of things, and I mentioned a fescue and a red-winged blackbird, what I probably should have said was, how did that feel in your stomach at that moment? What did
Mm.
your stomach feel like? What were your hands touching? What were your feet doing? Right. And I think if those things, when we actually have to feel into the spaces that of our own stories, have tremendous amount of power. Because if it's just up here, it does become more of a narrative, right? And less of a lived experience. But if, when writing is embodied, when it actually comes from our gut and comes from our actual bodies, not only is it better for the reader, people are going to want to read it more, because that's, they're not inside our heads, but they do have bodies, and so they know what it feels like to put their hand on the coldness of steel, or
Mm.
they know what it feels like to smush their toes into sand. They know what that feels like, but they don't know what our heads are thinking, right? And so I think that's the challenge for a writer, is to get out of their head and to actually get into our body,
Mm.
right? Because writing that come like, and that's the, like, I don't intend to bring this up, but like, that's one of the big differences between, like, say, like AI and ChatGPT writing, and like and our human actual writing. Is like, ChatGPT is like great at like writing from the head. What it really sucks at is actual lived experiences and telling actual stories that stem from the body,
Hmm.
because it doesn't have a body. It's got a really great brain, it's got a really great head, but it doesn't have a body. And so it's really terrible at telling stories in that
Mm.
way. And so it's not only, so it's, like I said, it's partially for the reader, but it's also for the writer, right? Because if we think of writing as a healing modality, which it definitely can be if you're doing it with that intention, um, it has to come from it has to come from the body, right? There is the cleansing act of getting all the shit that's in our head and getting it onto paper, and that's healing in and of itself, for sure. But it's even more healing, I think, when the writing that we're actually doing comes from our gut, comes from our feet, and it comes from an actual embodied place, as opposed to just, I'm going to regurgitate all this word salad that's in my head and I'm going to put it on the page,
Mm.
which has its place too, right? But they're two slightly different ways of approaching it.
Totally. And it's interesting because what comes up for me there actually goes beyond writing again and into like interpersonal dynamics.
Mm,
And I think of the idea of explaining versus expressing.
mm-hmm,
And,
mm-hmm.
like, we've heard the term mansplaining, right? And I think
Sure.
so many of us fall into explaining our lived situation. And
Mm-hmm,
I do for sure. I'm still learning to come into more of an expressive way of being. And
mm-hmm,
I'm sure a lot of it's because one, I've been disembodied, and two, it's felt safer to give sprinkles of vulnerability and not the depth of
yeah,
what's going on.
yeah,
Whereas like if I'm expressing what's happening, well, all of a sudden I am in the body. I am
mm-hmm,
saying, oh, like there's tightness in my chest right now, and that I'm fucking scared.
yeah,
Or like, oh, I got this sinking feeling in my gut, like I'm
mm,
terrified of losing this thing or whatever's going on, right? And that right away, as you said, is becomes so much more personalized because we do have these bodies, and everybody has experienced that sinking feeling in the gut. Everybody
mm-hmm,
has experienced that tension in the chest, or that feeling of the freeze in the body with not even sure where to take the next step. Like
right.
that is a very human experience that can bridge barriers, maybe where certain words might fall short, but when you can do that enough to point to the expressed or the lived experience. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, man. I mean, and we say that we say show don't tell. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Like, show it, put it in scene, put it in body. Like, show what is actually happening here. Don't explain. Don't tell me what happened. Like,
Hmm.
actually, and it's a hard. It's I like that you said you put the vulnerability piece in there, because I've found that, and it's very difficult to do this, with your own writing. You actually usually need somebody else to look at it for you. and point out some of these. You can do some of it, but we tend to not be able to see the forest through the trees. So you usually need somebody else to do it for you. Is to say like, hey, like here, you're just telling me. You're telling me, and like I like what you're saying, but like I need this to be put into scene if you actually want me to feel this and you actually want me to experience this, right? And I think
Mhm.
that you're right. That goes for, man. I mean, I think that goes for, it goes for all relationships, whether it's a relationship that we're hunting, whether it's a relationship that you're having with a woman and a significant other, right? Like you want the person to feel you, to feel what it is that you're actually saying, as opposed and let that resonate and drop in with them, as opposed to just like having a lecture at them. You know what I mean?
1,000%. And that's coming from a man who spent his whole life lecturing. I, I've realized too, like that's, I think we were talking about this before the call, but just realizing how much more connected I feel now and how
Mm,
much more intimacy I experience in my relationships because, in the last 5 years, for the first time, I actually feel seen.
mm, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm able to reveal the parts of me that I was scared to be witnessed in, that parts of me that I'm learning to love myself and to
Hmm.
put that out in the mess, in the muck, in the unpolished rough edges, and
Hmm.
put that out there to be observed and to be witnessed, and then to have the mirror back in that experience. Like, it is the opportunity for me to feel seen, and I've craved and longed for deep intimacy and connection, and also have come to realize that I've been my own impediment to experiencing that
Hmm.
because of the way I've explained rather than expressed my entire life.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard work, man. It
Yeah.
really is. And like, and I thinking right now about like my book is with my editor friend who's graciously editing it for free, which is like it would probably be about $8,000 to get this thing edited if I really wanted to, and she's a brilliant editor. Um, and I was thinking about some of the comments that she's sending back, which are exactly that, moments of, uh, and she's a really brilliant woman as well. And she says she's pointing out a specific moment where I'm talking about like comfort and how like I don't want to be comfortable, or the problems that comfort causes essentially. And she was like, listen, this is really your theory, your philosophy here is really, really great. She's like, but I feel like you're not, like there's something deeper here that you need to get to, and the reason that you're not getting to it is because you're not being vulnerable enough, and there's something else that you need to share. And I was like, oh shit, you're right. You're totally right. I didn't see it, but you're absolutely right. And
Mm,
so, um, yeah, and it allowed me to revise it in a new way that was like, okay, well, this is actually what's happening.
mm.
Yeah.
I love it, man. I love it. And that is true strength, really.
Mm,
I I've loved the direction of this conversation. You are a wealth of wisdom, man, and I
mm.
appreciate
Thank you.
that you can turn the pain and the darkness that you've experienced into a beautiful gift that you continue to harvest for yourself and also share with others. Because
Mm. Well,
yeah, I
thank you
can
for that.
feel it. I can feel it. I feel the pull from the other coast here, so much so that I want to come out and spend some time with you, man.
Come on out, brother. Come out. Like I said, man, this is I'd love to show you the woods and the mountains around me and our bears, and yeah, I'd love to have you. It'd be a deep, deep pleasure for
Mm.
sure.
Thanks, brother. Is there any last message or anything that you'd like to share as we bring this to a close?
Well, I think I'll leave it with this. I think for a lot of people, a lot of men especially, like I said, who are lost, a lot of men who don't know who they are and don't have a direction. Um, yeah, just take that first step. That first step is a frightening step to take sometimes. because we don't know where it will lead us. It leads us into the unknown. But know that on the other side of taking that first step is a journey that is beyond your wildest imaginations, and it is a life that is waiting for you that is greater than you can even imagine. Right. And so, yeah, if you're lost, if you don't know where to go, and if you don't know who you are, just take that first step, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Start close in.
Yeah. Just one step at a time, man. One step at a time.
Amen, brother. Where can people find you? We'll make sure to link it in the notes, but
Yeah, I think Instagram is still the best way to find me at Step Into Your Wild. If you want to come out on a primal hunt, we have fly fishing events throughout the year as well. We're pretty full on booked up this year, but we will have plenty next year. Where we take men and maybe next year some women out into the woods, and we teach them how to track. We run a sweat lodge. We do a very ceremonial and intentional hunt for black bear in the Eastern Sierra, and yeah, it's a deep rite of passage and an amazing event. And so come out and do join one on one of those. We also do some coaching with men one on one, and any of that can be found on Step Into Your Wild on Instagram.
beautiful. We'll make sure that's all linked, and I'm looking forward to getting out there with you, brother. Thanks again, man.